We're talking with Steve Quayle and Timothy Alberino. When did these giants who were buried in Sardinia die, and how much demonic activity, spiritual activity, do you find on Sardinia? Is there any link between that as a hotspot for giants and a hotspot for demonic activity?
Well, it is. If you look at some of the customs of the neurologic culture, what you discover is the rudiments of Phoenician culture, of Canaanite culture. So you have a lot of the Molech motifs all over Sardinia and their little figurines, the little statuettes that they discover all the time inside of the tombs of the giants, inside of the Nuraghe towers. So there's there's a very strong Sumerian Middle Eastern influence on the island, which is very strange in the Mediterranean, especially considering that the only known ziggurat ever discovered in the Mediterranean is in Sardinia.
Really?
So it's called Monte de Codi, and it's a ziggurat in the style of the Sumerian ziggurats and those that were found throughout the Middle East. Right,
which kind of preceded they look sort of like primitive pyramids, but they are older. The ziggurats are older than the Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah, this ziggurat on the island of Sardinia basically solidifies the idea that there was some kind of a Middle Eastern influence happening uniquely on the island of Sardinia. All the towers, the tombs of the giants, I think it's safe to assume, and I think people are going to be drawing the same conclusion after watching our film, that the Canaanite giants had a stronghold on the island of Sardinia.
What's interesting, too, on the neurologic culture, that you even see that in some of the Pueblo designs, like at Chaco Canyon. You see it in the observatories. That's what a lot of people are losing track of. You know, in essence, when Joshua and Caleb went into the Promised Land and drove out the giants, I think word spread really fast, even faster than gossip on the Internet, okay? So that basically they had to flee for their life. And you said something, I want to deal with the demonism in this, because demons are called lying spirits in the Bible. They're the disembodied spirit, you know, from the Greek word daimonizomai. They had to have been embodied before they're disembodied. What's fascinating now, Derek, is all of the overwhelming stories that are on the world newspapers, and even the Smithsonian. You'll find this interesting. They who have done more to cover up the existence of giants are now basically heralding the virtues of cannibalism. Now, cannibalism is interesting. It comes from basically the worship of Baal by the Canaanites who demanded human sacrifice. And somebody said, well, why is this important? Because it's the spirit that's been loosed. Over the years I've been on talk radio, a lot of people have contacted me from all the different, I would say this, the spook world, black ops. That just simply means stuff that most people don't know exists. But there is an overwhelming quest. There's an overwhelming amount of effort being put in to find basically old relics, extractable DNA, i.e., can you imagine a mummy from, 18 feet tall? And some of the people that were involved in the original extraction, the mummies from the Grand Canyon, those were taken to Area 51, okay? That's the nice benefit. And, Tim and I and anybody who's out there researching, you've got to withhold certain bits of information to basically break the feedback loop of coming back to you. But what's really important is that the criticisms against Sardinia having giants, and I want to share this, right now the biggest, most well-funded documentary by James Cameron, obviously the director of the Titanic,
right.
Avatar, I want you to remember this, Terminator, the only man to go down into the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the Pacific Ocean, who is putting his bucks, big bucks, into the search for Atlantis. The key to Atlantis starts in Sardinia. Even though they started there, they don't get it. The fascinating, if you will, the genetic tracing, tracking, and I've said this before, and I think you've heard me say this, I've said it a lot of times, but the Human Genome Project was not so much about the human genome, but it was identifying the genes or the genetic markers of the giants, okay? The appetites of demons always express themselves in human sacrifice. Now we've got the biggest, I would say, soon-to-break story, the Pedogate, all of the cannibalism of the wonderful little children, and the sickness that's out there. That's the spirit that's been loosed. So from the time that, we're dealing with, even we were all at Tom and our film crew, by the way, we had a film crew there too, with everybody in the desert Southwest. And what was fascinating, even though the Native Americans knew that these giants were basically destroying them, eating them, Tom has talked about the Sand Canyon. The giants literally, the Anasazi, the ancient ones, the alien ones, were running for their lives, and they were literally lunch on the hoof, okay, or lunch on the foot. So there was always a denial in I would say this, the denial by ethnographers, by anthropologists, that there was any cannibalism in the United States has now been put just to total rest. The burial mounds, and they call them the Adena and the Hopewell. We can trace all of those to basically South America, Mesoamerica, Latin America, And what's important that people understand is this, is that even in Texas, some people pronounce it Karnakawa, the other people pronounce it Karankawa, but the appetite of demons was always expressed through these cultures, and so it wasn't just ritual cannibalism, it was full scale, what's for lunch. And I think it's fascinating that now we're coming full circle, and that's pretty hard for most people. That's the ultimate taboo. But now we're seeing it in the headlines, just as Tim was talking about the Canaanites. And by the way, there are 3 great books that people want to know about the Canaanite and the Philistines in America. America BC, Bronze Age America, and Saga America by a Harvard anthropologist, ethnographer named Barry Fell, okay?
Right.
So it's impossible to say they never came here. And so the Egyptian presence, that's kind of what that we've got. With every single monument in the Grand Canyon have an Egyptian name. We were in the Valley of the Giants, okay? How did that get its name? Well, beyond the Navajo legend that these are great warriors frozen in time, it goes way back. The fact that Apaches have been found with Egyptian genetic markers.
Really?
The story is that Alexander Helios, the son of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, history basically just doesn't record where he went to. The stuff we're digging up indicates that they came to the Grand Canyon, 50,000 strong. Okay, now remember the water level. We're talking, a couple thousand years ago, and the water level was much higher. Just like you can look at, good night. We were at Lake Powell, and you can see the bathtub ring, and it's down, down, down. That's an artificial lake, but the Grand Canyon wasn't. So what's fascinating is this: is that the rock formations that are in the Grand Canyon and other places in the desert Southwest, even the different kivas, all line up with the heavens, okay? And what we have done, and Tim and the film crew have done, is in Sardinia, I believe they've found, if you will, the origin of the dispersion, what did they call it? The diaspora of the giants even to the Americas. And again, you cannot separate the neurologic culture / architecture / giants, and then you see it repeated in the desert Southwest. We will prove that to beyond any doubt. And here's what, again, the bottom line is, I like to get there. We should have started with that statement at the beginning. The bottom line is that you cannot doubt, number one, the presence of giants. Number two, people try and, say, those aren't giant graves. They don't understand. The giants are buried under the ground. And I told Tim, I said, Tim, I want the helicopter shot. Where they went was like, you got these guys and, little spies, okay? And then when they've got a helicopter, as they get closer to the current excavation of giants, guess who's the eye in the sky, And so what we're trying to say is people are doing everything they can to cover this up until the time of their release, when they can spin all the history to their advantage, as Tom has done in, Exo Vaticana and all the stuff you're doing. And I think it's really important. Tim, go ahead and take the...
Well, I think it's interesting that, Steve was talking about the giants maybe migrating out of Sardinia and going all over the place, because one thing we know about the Neurologic civilization is they were adept sailors.
Yeah.
And they built these large boats that were Phoenician, basically. They were just like they were part of the Phoenicians, a branch of the Phoenicians. And so they did sail all over the world. We know that's a fact. Even the conventional historians and archaeologists admit that.
Well, exactly. And that's something I stumbled across in my research that the Egyptians, all the way through the Persian period, from 4,000 years ago to 500 years before Jesus, whenever they needed a navy, they'd contact the Phoenicians or the Canaanites and basically hire them out as a contract navy.
Yep.
And,
in fact, the Egyptians hired the Chardon, what they call the people the Chardon from Sardinia. We know that they hired the Chardana because they're in their hieroglyphs.
Right.
So the Egyptians were even, and among these people in Sardinia, just like in Canaan, among the regular sized people was the giant class.
Mm-hmm.